Okay, everybody, we are back at 3 o'clock. We have our 3 o'clock session is Justin Allen, who will be talking to us a little bit about influencing skills and how to help loved ones make difficult choices. And so let me get Justin linked up with us. He looks like he's ready. So there we go. Justin, can you hear me? There you are.
Yes, I can. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. You look awesome and ready to go.
Thank you.
Okay, it's all yours, Justin.
All right.
Wait, before you start, I didn't even introduce you. So sorry. Justin Allen is the managing director of Ulrich Allen Leadership Capital, a research and consulting firm which provides advisory services and executive coaching for leaders around the world. He is the author of articles published in Harvard Business Review and 2 books, Talent Accelerator and HR Transformation. Justin has coached and developed thousands of leaders in many companies, including Disney, Gap, IBM, IKEA, Intel, McDonald's, Microsoft, Walmart, and many more. Justin loves spending time outdoors with his wife and 8 children, and we are really grateful to have you joining us today.
Thank you very much. And I want to double check. It looks like we have 53 participants on. Is that what you're seeing also, Heidi?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. And is there a way in the chat for me to share documents with our participants? Sometimes that's a feature that's enabled in Zoom, and I'm not sure if that's enabled today.
If you have a link that you want to show, I will share it in chat, and then you won't have to. I'll manage the chat a little bit for you, but you can see the chat. So you're welcome to post something there.
Okay.
We also have a button for question and answers if anybody would like to ask some questions as well.
Okay, wonderful. One thing I would invite everybody to do, if you can, is if you can just feel free to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I would love to take questions as we go along, and I hope we can make this as interactive as possible. I know that doing things on Zoom, it's not like as if I were in the room with you, because normally I would want to look into your eyes and to be able to interact with you and in fact practice what we're going to talk about today. But unfortunately, the way this works is we can't do that. So we'll do the best we can, and I hope that I can share something that's useful for you and that hopefully will end up being something that will benefit your lives as much as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides with you. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. Okay. So you can see my slides, Heidi?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. As Heidi said, I have had the opportunity of working with leaders around the world. In fact, when this crazy pandemic started, I was in Saudi Arabia working with some leaders there in their electricity company, kind of like Rocky Mountain Power and Light, but for Saudi. And while I was like, we got a notice 24 hours, we're going to close our borders. So I was very blessed to be able to get a flight quickly and come back to the US. And I haven't traveled since. So this has certainly been an interesting time. And I've done a lot more of my work on Zoom like this. But as I was approached, you know, I've done I love to do work pro bono and work with different organizations. And I've certainly had my own caregiving experiences. And so when I was approached, I was excited and thought, what would perhaps be most helpful that I could share? And I hope that sharing ideas about influencing skills to help loved ones make difficult choices would be something helpful to you. And I would like to add a caveat before I really get into this. And that caveat is if your loved one is suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's, this is not necessarily, these aren't the skills that would help you help them, because an individual certainly needs to be able to make decisions for themselves that are rational decisions in order for this approach to work. And so if you're listening and you're giving care to somebody who is having a harder time in that realm, then maybe listen as in the way that you influence your children or your spouse or your friends or somebody else, because these skills certainly will apply across. With that in mind, I'd just like to, again, say welcome and remind you that the whole purpose of this is if you're tired of nagging and cajoling and pushing and pulling and trying to outright force your loved one to do things, whether it's just to get in the shower or maybe something much more difficult, like, hey, mom, we need to help you get into a different place. You're not safe here on your own, or maybe getting dad to stop driving. That's kind of what I hope I can share some thoughts about with you today. And I share this with everybody when I do a presentation like this. I hope that we can kind of set some rules for the way we work together. And now that kind of there are a few more of you who have joined, there's about 62 of us together here. And so we've started on time. On the bottom rung of this pyramid, be present. I know that with this kind of a virtual environment, it's very easy to get distracted. It's easy to have me on one screen and something else on the other screen. Maybe some of you are watching Netflix right now, I don't know. Or, trying to also take care of mom or dad who you're caring for. It's hard to be present. And if it's possible with your current situation right now, I invite you to shut other things off. Try to get in a space where you can listen, and not just listen, but think about how this applies to you. And that's what Make It Your Own really is all about. There might be some things I say that don't apply to you, but I hope that there are some things where you say, you know what, I can take that one, or I could do it this way. Or maybe what he's saying would work for me if I just changed it a little bit. So please note that these ideas and the things I'm going to share are research-based. They are based on data that's been gathered from hundreds of thousands of people. And at the same time, each one of your own situations is unique. So think about how you might adjust it, tweak it, change it for you specifically. Now, the middle ones, this is one which applies a little bit more when we have an open group, but I thought that I would include it because we do have the chat. And in that chat, I'm just going to make sure I can see this chat screen here. And we also have the Q&A. If you click on, in your Zoom link, if you click on the button that says chat, and I think most of you should be able to see it, or maybe you can click on the more, and you can chat to panelists and attendees. That way, your message will go to everybody, or you can use the Q&A and Heidi will see those. If you can share with us, be brave. If you have a specific situation and you're not sure, maybe I'll just keep it to myself. No, please, let's share it. And we're going to have some time towards the end of this hour together where I would love to take some specific situations and then talk about how to do that. And Heidi, I don't know if it's possible, for example, for you to make somebody else a panelist and for me to speak with them and everybody to see them. Is that possible with this webinar approach?
If someone is willing to do that, we absolutely can add them.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, so be thinking about that. If you have as we get into this and you're like, well, how would that work? I would love to do a bit of a role play for anybody who's willing, where you play the part of the person you're giving care for, and I try to be you, which I'm sure I won't do a good job of that, but maybe we can try that a little bit and do a role play so that it's more interactive and trying to see how this actually works rather than just some academic thing. So think to yourself, okay, do I want to be somebody who is willing to put myself out there, to be brave and be in front of the group here, and we'll do a practice. And then most of all, I hope we have some fun. I have some fun videos that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. And this is really an interesting topic. It's easy to get stressed out. I know that there have been certain periods of time in my life or individuals that I've been working with where like almost any interaction with them is a trigger and my stress is through the roof. I don't know if any of you feel that way right now, but sometimes, we get in that space, and I hope that this can be a little bit of a relaxer and that we can have a little bit of fun here. So I'm going to start with a stress test, because there are 3 things that we need to do before we can begin influencing others. And so this, I know Heidi, you just shared the link to the handout. This document here is not in the link, but I hope you can pull out a piece of paper and a pencil and use this. Now this document is from the Association of Stress Management. They're based in Texas, and they've done research on what causes stress. And they've actually found through their research that certain elements or certain events in our life tend to impact our stress more than others. So what I would say, as you look through this list, go ahead and quickly score the stress in your life. So, and I'll just, if you can't see, I know for some of you it might be very fine print. I'm going to read through these, but what I want you to do is calculate your score. Go ahead and calculate how many points would you have on your own, the stress in your life. And what you're going to think about is, has this event happened to you anytime in the last 12 months? And again, the reason we're doing this is because in order to influence others, we have to be careful about our own stress. It's one thing, if we can get our stress right and we can stay centered, take care of ourselves, we're in a much better place to influence others and not let our emotions take control. So let me read through these, and you are looking at them as well. Grab a piece of paper. If you see any, just jot down the points and tabulate and total your points. So here we go. Death of a spouse. If any of you have lost your spouse in the last year, I am so sorry. And that would count for 100 points on this scale. Marital difficulties, 73 points. Imprisonment, 63. Death of a close family member, 63. Personal illness, 53. If you're married, 50. I think that's kind of a funny one. Many of us are married, and even if we just have a marriage in our lives, that adds to our stress. So 50 points there. Dismissal from work. Many people lost jobs with the pandemic this year, 47. Retirement, 45 points. Change in health in a family member. Many of us who are caregiving were not caregiving a year ago. So many of us will have those as points that we can add. Pregnancy, 40. Gaining a new family member, 39. Business readjustment, 39. Change in financial state. Some of us with the pandemic suddenly had things jiggle around. We didn't have the same income that we might have had before. So that's a 38 points. Death of a close friend, 37 points. Change into a different line of work. We're trying to do something else. That's 36 points. Change in frequency of arguments. In other words, are we having more arguments than we used to have with either close friends or family members? That can increase our stress. That's 35 points. A major mortgage, like if we've just bought a house or we've just got into a situation where it's basically getting that weight of debt on us, that adds stress of 32 points. Foreclosure on a mortgage or a loan, 30 points. Change in responsibilities at work, 29. Leaving a child at home, or a child leaving home, I should say. So if one of your children went to college or left for some other reason, maybe that's a 29-point add. Trouble with your in-laws, 29 points. Outstanding personal achievement. It's interesting, sometimes great things that happen in our life also cause us stress. And I won't get into the psychology behind that, but add 28 points if you had some great achievement in your life in the last 12 months. Your spouse starts or stops work, or beginning or ending school. Both of those are 26 points. A change in living conditions. This might be you move to a new place, or maybe you don't have the same kind of level of income you had before, and you have to kind of change what you're doing in that regard. That's 25 points. Yeah, change personal habits. And that could be for good or for maybe bad. Maybe you started a bad habit, or maybe you actually picked up a better habit. But that change in our lives adds a little bit of stress. So that's going to be 24 points. Trouble with your boss, 23. There are 3 at 20 points, and it's change in working conditions or hours, moving or changing in residence, or changing in schools. Those are 20 pointers. Change in recreation, change in religious activities. That can cause a 19-point stress impact. Social activities and mortgage or loan, changing sleeping habits. That's 18 to 16. We have a couple at 15 points where I'm changing the number of family reunions. I always think that's interesting. We're going to have Thanksgiving coming up here, and many of us dread Thanksgiving because we interact with those in-laws or those people in our life that sometimes add a little bit of stress. Even going on vacation is 13 points, as you can see there. And holidays, even though we love them and we look forward to them, they actually add to our stress. And then if we have a minor violation of law, like a speeding ticket or something like that, it's 11 points. Now, as I went through all of that, I hope you added up your points. And the way to think about this is that when the more points we have, according to this research, the more likely we are to be experiencing stress and have a harder time with the kind of different things going on in our life. And so I'm looking for my score sheet here, and I'm having a hard time with my document. So I'm just going to pull out of here so I can see that. Somehow Zoom has taken over there we go. All right. So let me look at the score so that I can share with you what that looks like. Are you still seeing my screen, Heidi?
I am still seeing the list of events and their score.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me just pull up my quick document here to make sure I can tell you accurately what all of this means. So basically, if 150 points or less means that you have relatively low stress in your life. And so it's not, I mean, we all have stress, but 150 points or less, you're doing okay. If you have 150 to 300, you have a 50% chance of major health breakdown in the next 2 years. And again, this is according to the Holmes-Ron Stress Life Inventory. So watch out there. And then if you have 300 points or more, then your odds are at about an 80% chance of a major health breakdown for yourself in the next 2 years. And that's based, again, on this Holmes-Raw statistical prediction model. Now, everybody's different. Some of these things for some of you might be different than for others. And so it's not an exact science for individuals, but you can understand that on average, the way this works is if you're in a stress state and you're trying to influence others, trying to help them get to a place where they are, you're trying to help them do things that you know are good for them, but they're resistant to, the higher your stress level, the harder it will be for you. And I don't have time in this little hour to kind of get into stress management. Many of you already know this. There's 1,000 different shows or things you could watch, books you can read about managing your stress. But I would just encourage you, if you are suffering or challenged with some of these things, or even if you're just living this stress, be aware that your health is super important. You are important. I'm sure that's a message you've heard today as you've been on other sessions with other presenters. And I just strongly encourage you to take care of your own health. Figure out a recipe for yourself to stay centered and stick with it. Try to put something on a calendar for yourself, whether it's trying to just get that exercise you need or to eat right, or to find some of that time for yourself. Find somebody else to give care for a period of time. And I know that MAG actually offers a number of resources for caregivers like yourselves. So try to show up for yourself and be there. Now, with that in mind, we're ready to move on to item number 3. And I'd like to play a little video. Now, each one of us needs to be ready to listen. And so here is a quick video about listening that I find to be apropos. Let's take a listen to this video.
This pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
it's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on? We can work it out. We can work it out.
All right. I don't know if any of you have seen that clip before. I think it's a little bit funny. And I think if we can think about that in terms of the wonderful people we're giving care to, sometimes what seems to us to be obvious, Mom, your life would be so much better if you could just get in to an assisted living facility. They would take care of your food. There would be somebody on hand if there was an emergency. You know what? It just seems to be obvious to us, but to the other person, it doesn't necessarily seem to be obvious. And so while I'm not going to talk a lot about listening here on this session, again, number one, manage your stress. Number two, practice listening as much as you can. And so I would just encourage you, I have a quick slide on listening, which I'll share with you here, but there's three different levels of listening. And I won't get into the science of this, but the first level of listening that sometimes really gets in the way is when somebody is talking, we listen with self-interest. And so we're asking the question, what does this have to do with me personally? How does this impact me? You know, when I listen to Dad talking and I'm thinking, oh, great, like here he goes again. And I'm not necessarily listening to what he's saying or what his concerns are. So what does this mean for me? Number two is I'm hearing them and understanding their needs and experiences, but I kind of leave it at that. So I'm truly present. I'm there. I'm not kind of, looking at my phone, or I'm not like distracted by the kids or whatever when I'm listening to Dad, but maybe I'm not fully kind of able to step into his shoes. And that's what level three is when we care personally and we say, okay, I can't say, Dad, that I know how you're feeling. I don't know what it's like to be you right now. I can imagine it must be so frustrating. You used to be running the world and now you're in this really difficult situation, and kind of practicing validation. If you want to look up something that I found to be a skill that if I had another hour, I would focus on validation. But this question of validating and saying, yes, your concerns are valid. What you're worried about is valid. And that's that level three listening where we're saying, okay, I understand deeply what we're talking about here, and it's important to me, and it is valid. Now, the third thing, I want to play a quick clip from Mr. Rogers. So I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute and play a little video from Mr. Rogers, and he'll introduce us to this next thing. Let's see if I can pull it up on the Zoom thing here. Screen share. Okay. And by the way, as I introduce this, you all know Mr. Rogers. I loved Mr. Rogers growing up as a kid. And if any of you haven't seen, I don't know about the new movie with Tom Hanks. I haven't actually had a chance to see that yet, but the documentary that was done on Mr. Rogers is fabulous. So if you see that, if you have a chance, find that documentary. It's not with the actors, it's actually Mr. Rogers, and it talks about his life and his vision. If you're looking for a great distraction, something that might make you start crying, check out that documentary on Mr. Rogers. Here's a quick clip.
I think silence is one of the greatest gifts that we have.
His questions are direct, simple, short, and then he waits.
He interviewed me, and he put his face about 3 inches away from my face. It says, "It's so nice to see you and to be with you." It scared the living daylights out of me. But I realized this is what children do with adults.
And sometimes after they answer, he doesn't say anything else. so they say a little bit more. It's a perfect interviewing trick. Very funny, very funny, very funny. I'm not falling for it. Very good.
All right. So, one of the things we learned from Mr. Rogers is that, and among many others, is the ability to be silent when we're listening. And it brings into the next point. So part of that listening is to validate and really try to put ourselves in their shoes and acknowledge that the experiences they're having, though we might not understand them, though we might not have that nail in our head, they're valid. And then the second part is giving them space to speak. And again, like I said at the top, this could be with somebody you're giving care for, but it also could be with your spouse or with your child. Just being silent, showing that you're willing to sit and listen. And sometimes just kind of thoughtfully being quiet, like Mr. Rogers so frequently did, after listening will allow somebody to go on. And some of you might be thinking, you know what, my mom she's never going to stop talking. Like literally, if I give her any space, she could talk for the next 4 hours. And maybe that's true. So your own individual situations might be different. And at the same time, try to practice using that silence as you listen. Now, the next element that I wanted to get into, which silence builds towards, is trust. And so let's take a look if I can bring back up my slides here. Let's see if I can find it. I always have so many things open on my screen that I sometimes get a little lost in what I'm looking for. Here we go. So now, again, I could spend a whole hour on trust and building trust. And I'm sure that you might think to yourself, hey, I've got trust with mom or dad or with whoever, aunt or uncle, with my son or daughter, with my spouse, whoever it is I'm caring for. We already have that trust. I invite you just to take a quick note and jot these 4 elements of this equation down. If you ever feel like your spouse, for example, you're trying to help her or help him, you're caregiving for him or her, and you're stressed out and you've got all these things, and maybe he's beginning to question your motives. Maybe she is beginning to say, are you really there for me? You can audit or you can evaluate the level of trust you have with that person by going through these 4 things. So quickly, I'll go through them. Number 1, credibility. This is about our expertise. It's like, how do we look? How do we act? How do we react? Do they believe that we actually know what we're talking about? And sometimes when we're caregiving, it's like we might actually pretend like we know more than we do just to get them to do what we want them to do. But sometimes we actually know what we're talking about, but they don't believe us. So how do we bring in facts? How do we bring in, this is what the doctor said, or this is what, here's some studies that I've read, or this is what, our neighbor who they trust has experienced, whatever it is, try to bolster your credibility score. Maybe that credibility is getting in the way of them trusting you. The next one is reliability. And this is consistency. This is, they trust that we are going to do what we say we're going to do. So if I say, look, I'm going to give you a call, or I'm going to be over, or I'm going to be there, maybe you're working with some siblings and there's some trust issues there where you're the main caregiver and you feel like you're doing everything. And your siblings are like, well, what's wrong? I think we should just put mom in the home and get it over with. And you're like, no, we can't do that. Not right now. She needs to be at home. But, whoever you're challenged with trust on, that question of reliability, are you always there? Are you doing what you say you're going to do and not committing to things that you're not sure of? Because if that reliability score goes down, then the trust will be eroded. So number 1, credibility. And again, when you look at this, you can score yourself on a score of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. And you're scoring how strong you think your credibility is with the person that you're trying to increase trust with. So how strong is my credibility? Number 2, how strong is my reliability? If I'm always there, I always do what I say I'll do. I'm always 100% there. And this is what they think, not necessarily what I think. So if I'm working with my sister and we're trying to take care of mom, does she feel like I'm always there? Even if I know I always am and she thinks I'm not, I'm going to have to lower my score a little bit because it's about her perception. And then the last one there on the top of the equation is connectivity. So this refers to the level of our relationship. Like, are we really connected? Do we feel like we have a bond, that we have a personal level, or are we fighting all the time? If I'm fighting all the time with somebody, they're much less likely to trust me, and I'll have a really hard time influencing them. So again, score yourself 1 to 100 on credibility, score yourself 1 to 100 on reliability, and 1 to 100 on connectivity. Your top score on top of the equation could be 300. Now, as we know with division, and I'm sorry if I'm getting into math for some of you who never wanted to think about math ever again, but on the bottom of the equation, if we end up with a very high score, for example, if self-orientation, again, score 1 to 100 is 100, and you even have a top score in all of them, it turns the total number to 3, right? So if you have 100 top score in credibility, 100 top score in reliability, and 100 top score in connectivity, you have 300 points on top of your equation. I'm going to explain in just a second what self-orientation is, but I want you to know up front the math. If your self-orientation score is 100, then all of a sudden your overall score is only 3, because it just takes away everything. And what self-orientation refers to is their perception of my selfishness or my agenda. So if dad thinks that I have some agenda, and he's like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing here. You've done this since you were 8 years old, and you're just trying to manipulate me, and you're trying to get me to do stuff that I don't want to do, and you don't really care about what's important to me. If they believe that I have an agenda or that I'm really focused on me, then trust is going to go down. So quick equation, as we get into influencing, if we don't have trust, then our ability to influence will be super low. So hopefully this is a helpful thing. And just to kind of remind you then of these three elements that I find very helpful when we're trying to influence before we get into the influencing element. Number 1, stay centered. Focus on your stress. Be aware of what's stressing you and what's crazy, making your life crazy. And many of us are well aware of that, but be aware that it can negatively impact us and our ability to influence, and try to do something to help manage that stress for ourselves, take care of ourselves. That's number 1. Number 2, listen. Try to listen at that level 3, validate and practice using silence, as we learned from Mr. Rogers. And then number 3 here, build trust. How do we maybe think about trust? We can perhaps use this equation to evaluate how much trust they might have for us, or if there's a specific area of these 4 variables in the equation that is breaking down. And so with that, I'd like to get into one version of attempted influence. Now, I don't know if you've seen this clip before, but I'm going to go ahead and share a very fun video here. See if you recognize any of this happening. Let me share my screen again. Here we go. All right. I don't know if you've seen that clip before, but it's certainly, I think, a good, bad example. If we're trying to influence others, sometimes it feels like we just want to say, stop it, just do this thing. And obviously, even if what we are saying is right, even if our approach is the right approach, it's not going to help the person to move in that direction that we want them to be moving in. I'm going to share my slides again and introduce to you a model that I hope will be helpful to you. And we'll just spend the last 20 minutes talking about this model. If you can see there on the screen, this model is called Grow, and there are 4 steps to grow. And in the handout that you have, if you click on that link that Heidi shared, and or if you had it from before, you should be able to see this model and some questions that go with it. Now, this model is often associated with coaching. It has to do with the things we just talked about: listening to others, trying to understand them, building trust. And I find it very helpful anytime I have something that I'm trying to work on somebody else with to influence them. So here are the 4 steps. Number 1, goal. In other words, we have to try to understand, what is the goal? Is there a mutual goal? does the person I'm working with, whether mom or dad or my wife or whoever it is that I'm caregiving for, what is the goal that we're mutually trying to achieve together? Number two, what have they tried so far? What are the results? Number three, what are the options available? And number four, what are our next steps? Now, the key here with all of this is that we need to be very careful not to be directive. Now that, if you can just take this one thing away from this model, do not tell them what to do. If you're using this influencing. Now, sometimes again, there's different times of when to use it. Sometimes we do need to say, you must do this. That's not what this is. That's not what this class is about. This hour together is talk about when you're trying to influence them to make a choice that they will be good for them. And the more likely, so they're much more likely to do what we're trying to help them to do if they choose it for themselves. That's just basic psychology. You know, it's like the old joke, how many psychiatrists does it take to help somebody change? Or to change the light bulb? Well, it only takes one, but that person who's changing the light bulb has to really want to change it, right? So, I mean, and that is the truth. If we have a desire, if we feel ownership, if we feel like we are empowered to make things different in our lives, no matter what age we are, we're much more likely to take action on that. Now, if somebody's in danger, or if somebody is having a problem, or if they're not in their right mind, again, this approach might not be the best. If there's somebody who is capable of making decisions for themselves, and you believe that this actually is in their best interest, then this is a good approach. So let's get into grow, and we're going to dive into each one of these different elements and just kind of talk about each one. And I might just add as we go through it that when you look at these, you want to spend 80% of your time on results and options in general. So it's not necessarily how you're going to allocate the conversation, 25% to each element. You're going to try to hit the goal and then dive into results and options and then focus on way forward. Let's talk about this. And again, you should have a sheet if you hit that link that Heidi shared in the chat, or if you have it from previously. I know that they shared a lot of these documents for those of you who registered earlier. You should have this document that's titled Grow, a framework for helping loved ones make difficult choices. Now, in each one of these different 4 elements, I have a list of questions, and it's very important to note that these are questions. We're not trying to tell somebody what to do. So we're trying to help them come to the conclusion themselves. And I'm going to review the questions, and then I'm going to use a generic example of helping my mom move into an assisted living facility. Okay, so that's the example I'll give. And if we have some time at the end, I'd love to hear some examples that you have in practice using this. So the first thing I want to do is try to clarify the goal. So I can say things like, all right, what is really important to you? What do you really want? And so when I ask my mom that question, she might say things, well, I really care about you and the kids and the grandkids. And I really want to have my independence. I just don't want to be stuck with people I don't know. Okay, and so I can begin to then identify and listen, what is it that she really wants? And then I could ask her questions if she's not hitting on the things that I think are important, like safety. Like she might have already fallen. Maybe she's broken her hip. And I say, well, what do you want? And, I know, Mom, that I really want you to be around for my grandkids or for my kids. I want you to be around for your grandkids and to be there for all of us. And we love you so much and we appreciate you. Is that something you want? And she might say, yeah, I do want to be around. Okay, great. Well, what do you want in that regard? Well, is that really important to you? So asking these questions, okay, well, what worries you? So what worries you, Mom? This is the question number 3 here about moving into an assisted living community. And she might say, well, I don't know anybody and I'll feel all alone. And she might go through a whole number of lists. Now, I'm not going to, at this point, I'm not going to try to refute what she's saying. I'm not going to say, you won't be alone, Mom. There's going to be a ton of great people there. As soon as I do that, I'm not validating. I'm not listening to her. And she's going to probably put her walls up and be a little more defensive. She won't be as willing to be influenced. So I want to kind of draw that out of her. What worries you? Okay. And then when I hear that, I say, so I understand you're worried that you might feel lonely, or you're worried that you won't be able to cook your own food, or you're worried that maybe you'll just like you're basically writing your life off because you've never thought you'd be in a place like that. Whatever she says. And then this last question here, number 4, is very important. Well, what do you need to make a decision about, Mom? So what do you think? And she might say, well, I have to decide if I have to, you want me to go to this assisted living place and I don't want to go there. And I say, okay, well, that's one decision that we're talking about. And there are other decisions. And if they don't necessarily come up with them, maybe you can suggest some here, but try to help them come up with their own. And so if my mom stops there, I might say, Mom, do you want to make a decision about, obviously you can't control how long you're here, but do you want to make choices about being able to be around for my kids and for me for longer? We love you and you support us so much. You do so much for us. So what do you really, is it just about moving, or are there other decisions that you're trying to make as well? So this is step number 1. It's the G, and we're asking the question, all right, what is the goal? What are we really trying to accomplish? Now, that brings us to number 2, and number 2 is all about the results. And this isn't necessarily the results that we want to have. Like, I want to have this result. I want to influence my mom so that she chooses to move to the assisted living facility. But the results I'm trying to get at here are what has my mom done so far? So I want her to begin to acknowledge and understand and accept the reality. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being bad, 10 being good, how well is this current situation working out? Well, it's great. I'm fine here. I'm happy in this house and I never want to leave. Okay, great, Mom. Now, remember, we just talked about those goals that we have, your goals and my goals. I care about your health. I want you to not be in pain. Whatever those goals are that you've listed down together, and sometimes you write it down, sometimes you just talk about it, but say, okay, well, let's talk about each one of those goals. You express that you don't want to have a hip replacement. You don't want to break your hip again and have those problems. I think we both share that goal. How is it going? Well, you just barely got out of the hospital and just barely got out of rehab, and it's been really hard. And so what would you say, Mom, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's that going? Or whatever those goals are, have them score those. And then say, well, what have you tried so far? So you're trying to stay healthy. I know you are, Mom, and you're eating the right things and you're taking your pills and you're doing all this stuff. What have you tried? And again, this is validating, showing, okay, I understand you're doing a lot to help achieve those goals. And then you get to step number 3, or question number 3. Well, if you keep doing the same thing, what is most likely to happen there? What's going to happen if you keep doing the same thing, Mom? And in most cases, if you're right, if what you're trying to influence mom or dad or husband or wife or son or daughter or whomever to do, if you're actually right, then if they keep doing the same thing, they're going to end up in a bad place. That's what you believe, or else you wouldn't be influencing them. So in my case with my mom, I say, Mom, if you keep doing the same thing, what's going to happen? Well, I don't know. Nothing. I'll be fine. Okay, that's one possibility. What are some other things that could happen? Well, I guess I could fall again. Yeah, you could fall, and we might not be here to help you. Like Uncle John was here to help you. He was, what a blessing that was. He was just 5 minutes away. What other things could happen? Okay. So there are these different things going on. Help them to acknowledge that maybe what's going on right now isn't necessarily working. The third element or third step is then options. So this is where, again, we're not trying to tell them what to do. We try to help them discover what to do. And that's one of the real keys to influencing others, is they need to come up with it. So what else do you think could be done, Mom? What could we do if what's going on isn't working as well as we would both like it to? What do we do now? Where do we go from here? And what options do you think would lead to the results that everybody wants? I know, Mom, you love us all and you care about us so much. What can you do? What other things could you do that you're not doing right now that would really help us all to have these results? And She might say, well, I guess I could move to that place. So I don't. Why don't we just go for a visit? Maybe one small step is just going for a visit. And so here in options, again, you're trying to pull this out of them, but we don't want to be the guy, the bad therapist saying, stop it, and just tell them what to do. We don't want to be the bad husband who's got a wife with a nail in her head and just say, if you just get that nail out of there, everything will be better. No, if we tell them what to do, they're much less likely to be influenced. And so we need to pull that out of them. And one of the best ways I've found to help somebody think differently, especially when they're stonewalling or when they're stuck and they're trying, but they can't think of any other options because they've got a certain mindset about how things work or how things should be, is to tell them a story. And so that's that note here on this document. It says, if you would like to recommend something, rather than just saying, stop it, or rather than just saying, let's get the nail out, what we can do is we can tell a story and say, you know what, Mom, you might not know this, but my wife, Emily, her dad went through something similar. And so I'd love to kind of work through that together and discuss that. And I'd love to share with you what happened there. And then I share that story, and that might help my mom come up with her own options. And let's move to number 4. This is a way forward. Now, ideally, by the time Mom gets to options, she's come up with some ideas, even if it's not the big thing, like let's get you into a place tomorrow, but maybe it's let's go visit 3 different assisted living communities. Then I can say, okay, well, what are your ideas about what you want to do now? Is there a specific thing that you need to do in order to achieve the goal? So you refer back to step number 1 with the goals. And if you don't know what you're going to do, then what do you need to do in order to make a decision? And this is where, again, we can share validation. Mom, I trust you. You're so wonderful. I know that you've made really good decisions. You can list the decisions they've made in the past. And then the last one's very important. This is the follow-up. Mom, would it be okay if I come back tomorrow and just hear what you're thinking about this? And that persistence, that following up again and again, being a broken record about, I care about you. This is important. Not you should do this, but being a broken record of, well, what have you thought? More questions, more asking. So that's the model. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. We have about 7 minutes left, and I'd love to open it up to questions. Heidi, did you have some questions here?
I did have a question from one of our participants. She mentioned that her daughter goes in circles, so repeats something over and over again and can't change her focus. What can she do? Do you have any suggestions?
And that's a great question. And sometimes, everybody is struggling with different things in our lives, right? And sometimes I've known that I've interacted with some family members who have struggled with OCD or anxiety and even sometimes depression. We get in thought patterns, and it happens to all of us, where we get in these circular thought patterns and it's hard to pull out. And sometimes, there's actual need for real therapy there and some help. Other times, if your daughter is just getting in those circles and questions that are kind of repeating the same thing over and over again, I would try to practice this. And so maybe, she might say something like, blah, 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 or, she's going off on something. You say, okay, and let's just pretend your daughter's name is Laura. Laura, what is it that you really want here? What is your goal? What are we trying to accomplish? And she'll say, well, yeah, I've already told you it's this, and this, and this, and this. Okay, are there any other things that are important right now? Well, and you're trying to influence her, it sounds like, to stop repeating, to stop kind of focusing on these things and help her to see, okay, these are the goals. And then when you get to results, she might say, well, I just really want you to understand. I really need you to understand where I'm at right now. And that's why I keep saying it. Okay, great. I want to understand too. I really do. And maybe sometimes I don't understand. So validating, I think that's really important. Get into the R, results. What have you tried so far? Well, I just keep telling you, but you never listen to me, or I keep repeating it. Okay. And I do want to listen. I'm here to listen. Has that worked when you keep repeating it? Does it work for you? Is it working for me? Do you think you're getting what you want by repeating it again and again? And she might say, well, no, because you don't listen. And so I have to say it again. Okay, well then options. What else might you do? What could you try that could be a different approach instead of just kind of hammering me with it? Because when you repeat it again and again and again, I have a really hard time. And I sometimes accidentally, or not accidentally, but I shut it off because it's really stressful for me. And I'm dealing with all this other stress in my life. So what else could you try? Is there anything else you might do? And then hopefully she can come up with something. If she can't, then maybe tell a story of somebody else who was effective in the way that they interacted that didn't result in this repeating. And then say, well, what do you learn from the story? Well, I guess that other person did this thing. Do you think that could work for you? I don't know. What would happen if you tried it? Again, notice how I'm just constantly asking questions. The more questions I ask, the more likely is I'll draw something from them. And then on the W, okay, well, what are you going to do? What did you learn here? What's the way forward? Next time, if asking, questions constantly isn't always helping, what could you do? And what do you think you're going to do? And can I follow up with you? Can we check in tomorrow? I'd love to hear, or maybe next time we have a conversation, why don't you try that and we'll see how it works. So I don't know if that answered your question. I know this, like with a small little typing up question, I might not be addressing it at all. And so I fully acknowledge that. And I acknowledge that, again, this solution of grow, like I said at the beginning, I hope you can think, well, what is he saying that might be helpful? Maybe these 4 steps won't necessarily help me, but maybe some of that listening stuff or that validation stuff, or maybe there's just some questions that I could ask that might be helpful. I found with people from senior executives in large companies and government organizations, all the way down to my own children. And like Heidi said, I have 8 children, and I personally am a huge work in progress. I would say I'm constantly second guessing my ability as a father and trying to practice this myself. And it's not easy. It's a lot easier to talk about it to you all than it is to actually use this. But I think if you do, then it might be helpful. I'm just looking at the time. We've got 3 minutes and one more question. Is that right here, Heidi?
Yes, I wanted to just, to wrap up, you mentioned some skills that would be helpful for people to learn more. So stress management, listening, and validation. Do you have some references or books that are good to read that might help with development of those skills?
Yeah, that's a great question. In regards to it depends on where you want to go. One book that, and this gets into more, they use this with dialectical behavior therapy, but there's a book called Radical Acceptance that it's very interesting. And I think it really helps us think about mindfulness. So mindfulness is a skill that helps us to de-stress. So if you're trying to work on some of that, the first thing I talked about, which is the stress, Radical Acceptance is a book, or anything on mindfulness or on kind of that kind of thing where you're saying, okay, where am I now? What's my reality now? Looking at, whether it's diet or physical, there's 1,000 different things out on that, but you can look at those as well. As far as listening skills and conversation skills, if you really want to get into that, one thing I'd say is there's a book called Crucial Conversations. Crucial Conversations. And in last year's MAG conference, they had a gentleman from Vital Smarts, the organization that produces the training on this. And he came, and if you might have heard of him, but I heard him present last year. But I would recommend that book, Crucial Conversations. Another one is called The Anatomy of Peace. One of my favorite books about how we can learn to interact in a different way with others. It's by the Arbinger Institute. It doesn't have an author per se. It's the Arbinger Institute. It's called The Anatomy of Peace. So those are some references that might be helpful. And I saw one more question here from one of the members that says, and I had an experience in January, February of this year that I did not handle well. I've quote unquote divorced my mom because I couldn't handle her narcissistic personality anymore. I now contact her in her new senior housing facility when I'm ready to talk. And I feel like this is a bad example for handling with my life with my family. So I sense there some worry on your part that maybe you feel like you could have done things differently. And the thing I would say to you is Heaven bless you. It sounds like it's been a really difficult situation. And my guess is that you did the very best you could in the moment. So I wouldn't beat yourself up about it. And I would just say, you know what? If you use this skill, the goal or grow, goal, results, option, way forward, my guess is that you'll be able to maybe mend some of that relationship, and your family will hopefully be able to see that as well. And so I would say it's not over. You still have those opportunities, and maybe just take something really small in the way that you can interact with your mom, and it might be helpful, and you might see some positive results there. Well, Heidi, I think our time is up. It's 4:01. Back to you.
Ben, so great to have you. We truly appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who participated and listened today. Justin, do you have a slide that gives us your information? Are you willing to share that?
Yeah, I don't have it on a slide here, but I can type it into the chat.
Okay, that would be great.
I'll just put it in the chat and you guys can see it. My email address is justin.n.allen@gmail.com. And actually, that's my personal email address. Maybe I should have given you my work one. Anyway, you can email me on my personal one, and that'd be great. I don't live too far from Utah Valley. I'm up here in Wallsburg, Utah. If you know where Wallsburg is at, up Provo Canyon. So
yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great session. I just wanted to point out that I think your GROW framework would be helpful for an individual in looking at how they want to proceed and not just working with a family member. And some of us are at those crossroads where we need that support as well. So it's a great tool. Thank you so much.
You are absolutely right. And it's so funny. I didn't talk about that, but you got it, because we use this model for both when we're working with others and also working with ourselves.
Right. So, okay. Thank you again, Justin. Have a great day, and hope to be in touch with you again.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody, with your caregiving. Heaven bless you. Have a good one.